Good evening, everybody. And I congratulate you for making it here tonight. Well, that's not my problem now, is it? Welcome to Making Renewables Work for Montana, Part 1, a panel discussion sponsored by 350 Montana and co-sponsored by Citizens Climate Lobby, Climate Smart Missoula, Faith and Climate Action Montana, Montana Environmental Information Center, Montana Farmers Union, Montana Renewable Energy Association, Northern Plains Resource Council, Sierra Club Montana Chapter, Northern Rockies Rising Tide, and the amazing Big Sky High School students, Friends United Against Climate Chaos. Give them a round of applause. Be sure to visit the tables you weren't able to get to outside after the event tonight. And again, first time, I want to thank my panelists for being here, and we'll be introducing you very soon. My name's Jim Parker. I'm on the leadership team of 350 Montana, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Thanks to all of you for coming to hear our panel discuss how to make renewable energy work for our state and how to demand, if you are so willing, that our leaders make a fair, equitable, and climate-correcting decisions on our future energy choices so that we, the people, as we make these demands for our future and the future of our kids and grandkids and their kids to follow. I also want to thank Missoula Community Access TV, MCAT, for filming tonight's panel discussion made possible through a media assistance grant. MCAT serves 17,000 households in the Missoula Valley on cable channel 189 and 190. This program will air on MCAT later, so please watch for it and tell your friends. Finally, I want to give a thank you and a shout out to Jerome Walker, another 350 Montana leadership team member. The discussion tonight was his brainchild, and he diligently organized much of what will happen tonight. Many of the words I'll share with you had come from him first. He and his wife are currently out of town in a much warmer place, but I know he'll be eagerly awaiting news from us later. Thanks, Jerome. A couple quick announcements, because why gather all of us together if we can't tell you about other things happening? So these are a couple announcements. One is regarding the National Climate March in Montana. So save the date of April 29th, 2017. And the note is, we're reaching out to anyone and everyone who might be interested in planning and organizing the National Climate March in Montana. The march will take place in Missoula on April 29th. But next Wednesday, February 15th, please come to Imagination Brewery on Broadway at 4:30 p.m. to discuss what this should look like and to volunteer to take on tasks in organizing and planning. So if you're interested in taking a role in this event or learning more, please join folks next Wednesday, 4:30 Imagination. And the folks that are really heading this up are both the Hellgate High School Student Action Team and the Big Sky High School students who are also working on climate change. And I think it's about time we older folks take a lead follow from our younger folks in our community. So let's look forward to that. Something else happening this Saturday. Please join Missoula Stands with Standing Rock at Free Cycles Missoula this Saturday, February 11th, starting at 4 p.m. Free Cycles is at 732 South 1st Street West. As many of you may know, yesterday the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers announced their intention to issue a permit for the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline under Lake Oahe, a route that would jeopardize the drinking water and desecrate the sacred lands of the Standing Rock Sioux as soon as tomorrow. Please bring a sign for the march and food for the potluck. Let your voice be heard and your heart be filled as we do our part to shut it down. There'll be some live music. The water protectors need our help more than ever. That president of ours is doing everything he can to push the pipeline through. Treatment of protesters by law enforcement is brutal. and veterans are putting their lives on the line. They need our support. We may not be in North Dakota, but we will witness the events transpiring, and we are affected. Our water, our earth, and our people are in trouble. So that's this Saturday, 4 p.m., starting at Free Cycles, Missoula. Okay, here's how tonight will work. We'll first hear from our panelists. Each section will have 20 minutes for their presentation, thereabouts. During these presentations, if you have a question for one of our panelists or more, please write it out on the index cards we gave you when you came in, or between sections, 350 members will have more. Just raise your hand. We'll get you one and write down your question. Please direct your question to one or more of the panelists that you're asking. And after the panelists have all spoken and given their presentations, we'll keep running your questions and answers until we run out of questions or we run out of energy, whichever comes first. And please watch for Making Renewables Work for Montana Part 2 in late spring or early summer. We hope to welcome former Governor Brian Schweitzer, among others. Brian would be speaking about his book, PowerUp.Energy, and hear the latest also about new battery technologies, electric cars, and much more. And do visit our website, 350montana.org, for ongoing information and ways you can take action with us and allies that we have around our state. Please sign up on the sheets outside for email updates if you'd like those too. Okay, so in the late 1980s, James Hansen became the first scientist to offer unassailable evidence that burning fossil fuels is heating up the planet. In the decades since, the world has warmed, the ice has melted, and the wildfires have spread. I'd like to start with a few excerpts from a recent Rolling Stone interview with James Hansen, the world's leading climate scientist, about the situation we find ourselves in. Quote, "In the U.S., we didn't face up to the dangers of World War II until we were forced to, and then we did a lot. But in this case, it's particularly difficult and crucial because of the inertia of the climate system and the fact that the climate system gains momentum, and you've got to stop that. It's a very powerful system. We're close to the point of no return. The liberal approach of subsidizing solar panels and windmills doesn't phase you off of fossil fuels. It never will. We need a revolutionary third party that takes no money from lobbyists. The energy system and the tax system have got to be simplified in a way that everyone understands and doesn't allow the wealthy few to completely rig the system, or figure out how to live on a radically different planet." So let me briefly explain why we're having this event tonight. This is no longer his quote, by the way, in case you didn't guess. Northwest Energy, Montana's largest utility, recently put out a plan for how it wants to generate electricity here in the state for the next 20 years or more. The plan's over 200 pages long, and I can tell you it's not exactly what you'd call a page turner. But if you do wade through it, one thing in the plan jumps out at you, and it's very, very concerning. In it, Northwestern Energy, over the next 13 years, wants to build 7 new natural gas facilities comprised of 13 gas units to meet peak demand and deliver energy to Montana citizens. This is currently their choice of energy production rather than adding new renewables to meet our projected needs. Northwestern Energy claims that because solar and wind are intermittent, they can't be used to meet peak demand, like what happens on hot afternoons in the summer or cold winter days or nights. We at 350 Montana and many other organizations, some here and allies in Montana, couldn't disagree more with this claim, and that's why we originally decided to hold this panel discussion. But something important happened just last week. On February 2nd, the Public Service Commission in Helena essentially put all stop on Northwest Energy's plan to build new gas-fired power plants. Please read about it in that handout we put in the program for you as you came in tonight. It's a victory for citizens of Montana and now gives all of us until December of 2018 to organize and influence the new plan Northwestern Energy must present to the PSC. And let's make sure that renewable energy and energy storage applications lead the way. So please read about this and be ready to act with us in the coming weeks, months, and years. 350 Montana does not advocate any one solution to the problem of how to meet peak demand, except to use renewables and storage capacity options for the solution, not climate-damaging fossil fuels, a path that's leading us to global climate catastrophe. Our panel tonight will discuss a menu of possible solutions using conservation strategies, renewable technologies, and storage advancements to meet this challenge, and how we as citizens can act now to let our legislative leaders, decision makers, and energy providers hear from us and support our demands for a renewable energy future. And when we switch, as we know we must, to clean, renewable electricity that's generated by all the wind and sun and flowing water we have here in Montana, then some of these ideas that you'll hear tonight, maybe even most of them, will be needed and will be used. Tonight we'll be getting into the tall grass of technology and the economics of renewables. Why? Well, because we at 350 Montana believe it's our moral imperative as humans to move as rapidly as possible from burning fossil fuels to renewable energy sources. Why? Because we know global warming is no longer a problem we can shrug off and pass to our kids and grandkids. Global warming is happening, and it's been happening here in Missoula, in Montana, across the nation, and everywhere else in the world. And in Montana, it's threatening the twin pillars of our economy, tourism and agriculture. We're watching the glaciers disappear from Glacier National Park. Winters, on average, are milder. There's less snowpack, a shorter ski and winter sports season, and most importantly, less runoff for agricultural irrigation, river recreation, and fishing in the late spring and early summer. Our fire and smoke season starts earlier. It's longer, more likely to burn our homes, and much more expensive to fight and manage than it used to be. You'll also remember that last summer, the Yellowstone River, one of Montana's world-famous trout fishing and recreation corridors, was closed. Why? Well, because the water was so warm that parasites were killing the fish. This has never happened before. Climate change is here, and it's not still debatable, as our former Montana representative has suggested, or caused by sunspots, as one of our Montana senators states. Nor is it a Chinese hoax, as our new president, who will remain unnamed, has claimed. Politics is often about opinions, but climate change is about physics and facts. Everybody's entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts, even the alternative facts. These facts, though, are not a reason to despair or stick our heads in the sand. They're reasons to act. And coming to this event tonight, through the winter storm that you encountered, is such an action. Thank you for taking the time and feeling the need. But please keep acting. Keep taking the time and keep feeling the need. The earth needs your attention, your commitment, and your willingness to act. And so does your family, and their kids, and their grandkids. Because of the dramatic drops in price for renewables and innovations in energy storage systems in the last decade, we can now save our planet's climate and our way of life for about the same dollars we're spending to wreck them. We have the technology, the money, and the workers to make this big change. We have enough time to make this change if we stop all delay now. The question that remains is, can we muster the will and take the actions needed? A recent bipartisan poll showed that over 2/3 of Montanans from every corner of the state, both women and men, young and old, want to move to renewables now. So let's get on with it. Thank you. Our first speaker tonight is joining us via Skype from Billings. Her name is Mary Fitzpatrick. Mary served on the Northern Plains Resource Council's Clean Energy Task Force since 2006. She was on Governor Schweitzer's Climate Change Advisory Council in 2006-2007. She's a participant in Eco Angela, a Billings group promoting study and implementation of Pope Francis's encyclical on care for our common home, and is a member of Billings Citizens Climate Lobby. She retired from her private counseling practice in 2014. She will be one of the two panelists for our first section tonight. Please give a warm welcome for Mary Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, and thank you all for hitching up your renewable energy dog sleds and coming on out tonight. I know it's a pretty bad night there. And hello to Janet, sitting right there in the middle in the second row. So we are here to talk about our property assessed clean energy, which I will call PACE from now on. And it's a project, it's actually our legislative initiative for our Clean Energy Task Force. Northern Plains has started as to protect family farms and ranches from the ravages of coal mining, and has always maintained that commitment to family farms and ranches and to protecting the air and water, but it's also expanded to address other threats that are both urban and rural. And so the Clean Energy Task Force was established 11 years ago, both to, because we realized that digging holes in the ground was a threat to our air and water, but also because we knew we needed to advance clean energy. And so PACE is our current initiative. This is something that has to get through the legislature if Montana is going to have it. So we are working right now on getting our slides up for you. What has to happen here? It's down there. There we go. Okay, property assessed clean energy is what we're talking about, and here's a question I think everybody can answer pretty quickly. You see, this is a business owner, and of course, most of us live somewhere and we pay utilities in our homes or apartments. And so we all would like to save money on our utilities, and that's what PACE is all about. So, high utility bills, higher than they need to be. We know that energy efficiency is the least cost energy. It's cleaner, cheaper, and faster than any other form of energy. Don't use it, don't need it. And by the way, there should be, because this is our legislative initiative, we organized in order to influence decision makers, and so the decision makers right now are the legislature. So right there in the room with you, there should be a petition being passed around, and we'd like you to consider signing that to push our legislators to actually pass our legislation to enable PACE. So I'll talk about a little more about what has to happen for us to get PACE. A lot of people would like to have more efficient homes. They would like to have better insulation, better heating and cooling equipment. Maybe would like to put a windmill or solar panels on their property. And it's not just homes, it can be businesses, farms and ranches, but the upfront costs prevent that. There are other reasons why, but mainly it's the cost, and even a down payment on a loan. It's just hard to get even financing. And so the solution is PACE because it provides readily accessible private financing. This is not public money. It can be used for energy efficiency retrofits as well as clean energy production on existing buildings. And these could be businesses, they could be anything but a government building, any building, any property on which taxes are paid. So they can be used for energy efficiency, that could be lighting, heating, cooling, can be used for water conservation, and it can be used if someone wants to put solar panels or a windmill or geothermal kind of energy production. It's strictly voluntary for any property owner. No one is ever required to do this. Since it's a property assessment, it's paid when you pay your property taxes. It can be a long-term loan for up to 20 years, and then the taxing authority will collect the money and distribute it to the lender. So here's a list of some of the eligible kinds of things. I've already mentioned them. Anything that stays with the building, really, that you can't pick up and move if you leave, can be used, can be financed through PACE. It can be for residential, commercial, industrial, and a nonprofit, agricultural buildings. State or local buildings can't be part of it simply because they're not taxed, and so they're not PACE eligible. The PACE allows a property owner to save money on utilities, which can be passed on to tenants in the case of an apartment or a commercial building. It certainly creates local jobs and grows businesses that are involved in insulation and in renewable energy installation, heating and cooling, all of the other businesses that can, the contractors who would have to do the actual work of installation. And of course, when we spend money on our local businesses, that money keeps circulating in the community in the form of wages, in the form of the supplies that the business buys in the community. And so it's just a big boost to the community's economy. So all of these are some of the benefits of PACE. Do we have another slide? Here we are. PACE is already implemented and up and running in a number of states. You'd expect all those red dots in California. What's surprising is to see them in Florida, but hooray. All the red pins are where PACE is actually active with funded projects. And there are other states with the yellow pins that have enabled PACE, but it's still, the projects aren't underway yet. There are other states where it's in development, and there are others yet where they maybe have, the legislatures have enabled PACE, but it hasn't yet been implemented on the local level. So this is private money, as I mentioned. Any bank can participate, credit union. It works as a lien on the property, and because it's a property lien, the borrower doesn't have to go through a credit check. They just have to be current on their taxes. And the assessment, should the property be sold, stays with the property in most cases. And PACE programs can also work with mortgage lenders who want to cooperate with it. So we're all used to property assessments, new sidewalks, new water and sewer service, things like that. A particular part of town or the county is going to have an extra assessment placed on the property taxes, and we're used to that. And often they are as long as 20 years. So that would be another line for the treasurer to put on the tax bill that would account for the PACE loan. It's strictly voluntary on the part of the property owner. No one would ever be required to do this, which is not the case with some of the other special improvement districts. So what do we need to do? As I mentioned, we have to get the enabling legislation through the legislature. That's what we're going to be working on. After that, the taxing authority, the local taxing authority, which is either the county or a city, would have to decide to participate. Again, they don't have to. Private capital providers would decide to participate, and then contractors would have to be qualified in some way in order to do this. A particular project would also have to be evaluated part of the enabling legislation of the legislature would create the authority for this an agency of some sort. It could be run by the state government, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a business that evaluates projects to make sure that the energy savings will be enough to pay back the loan within 20 years, so that the total cost to the borrower don't go up and may even go down immediately. As long as, so the project can qualify if it will save enough to be paid back in 20 years or less. These are some of our supporters. In the fine print at the top, you'll see that the governor's office, Governor Steve Bullock, is a big supporter of this and in fact is sponsoring the legislation and taking the lead on getting it introduced into the legislature. We have some businesses, we have the Park County Senior Center and other, lots of contractors who are supporting this and would want to participate. There's at least a couple of lenders in there. So, and a lot of, we've been working with labor unions and with the treasurers and county commissioners, and a lot of pieces have to come together. So we're really glad to have all this support. You can also see our website on there, mtpace.com. We encourage you to go there and learn a little more about this, and you can sign up to be a supporter if you like, either your business or you as an individual. Northern Plains is having our Clean Energy Lobby Day next Thursday, February 16th. If you'd like to participate with that, we have training for lobbying if you've never done that, and you can sign up at www.northernplains.org. And you can join us there. You can also follow the legislation through the session and send in support for it and when it's in committee and on the floor. So I know that Abby and Amy are there. They'll be able to answer some of the questions later. You can get perhaps some questions answered on the website, and you can certainly contact Northern Plains if you have other questions. So we really would appreciate your support, and I'm just thrilled to see so many people came out on such a horrible night, and it just shows me that you really care about clean energy and renewable energies in Montana. So thanks a lot.
And thank you, Mary, and Northern Plains for Skyping in tonight. We appreciate it very much. We're going to cut you out now, unfortunately, so we can put some PowerPoints up here. But again, thanks so much for your participation. Next up, to complete this first section, is Abby Huseth. Abby joined Climate Smart Missoula in May 2016 and works on coordinating Climate Smart's energy efficiency and conservation efforts. Abby completed an MS in Environmental Studies at the University of Montana in December 2016, focusing on food and agriculture and climate change. Abby also coordinates a Missoula-based group, Faith and Climate Action Montana, helping faith communities get engaged around climate and environmental issues. She's not very busy at all, as you can tell. So please welcome Abby Huseth.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks to Mary, who's no longer with us. But it's great to hear a little bit more about PACE, which we think is a fantastic tool to have in the toolbox when it comes to energy efficiency and renewable energy and creative funding to make both of those more accessible. So we hope you'll support that. I want to take a little step back now and talk a little bit more broadly about saving energy in general. As Jim mentioned, I'm Abby Huseth, and I work with Climate Smart Missoula, and we are a community-based initiative that partners with lots of groups across Missoula to address climate change-related issues in our community. So the topic for this part of the panel tonight is reducing demand and talking about energy efficiency as the cheapest energy is the watts we don't use. Or as I like to call it, how to stop wasting energy and learn to love energy But it does seem obvious, right? Saving energy is good. You may be wondering a little bit, what does saving energy have to do with renewable energy, which is the overall topic of tonight's panel? Well, they really are two very important interlocking pieces of the energy puzzle. Energy use, as we know, is a huge driver of climate change. We hear a lot about how clean energy is the key to addressing climate change, and that's true. As Jim mentioned, if we hope to avoid catastrophic climate impacts, we need to make a rapid transition to a clean energy economy. But the reality is that on our current trajectory, we won't be able to cut emissions fast enough to address critical climate impacts with renewables alone. To reach the global goal of carbon neutrality by mid-century, we actually have to use less energy too. The good news there is that there is a lot we can do to make that happen, to use less energy, both in terms of energy conservation measures, which you can think of as behavior changes that result in using less energy, such as maybe turning down the thermostat overnight, or energy efficiency measures, which are technologies that require less energy to perform the same function. So think replacing an old boiler or furnace with a newer, more efficient one. So using less energy or reducing demand in economic terms is about much more than just turning off the lights. Saving energy is not a sexy topic, and I realize that, but hopefully I can convince you in a few quick slides here that it really is important, and that there's a lot you can do beyond just turning off your lights to get involved right here. And more on that in just a moment. But first, I'll share a little bit of context for where we are. Right here in Montana, we have the 6th highest per capita energy-related emissions rank there. You'll kind of see in the red our state circled. We're not anywhere near Wyoming, our poor neighbors to the south, but it's kind of a dubious distinction there. So that has to do partly with our energy mix and other factors, but we've got a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. A lot of our carbon footprint is related to our energy. And nationally, it's interesting to know that buildings, both residential and commercial, account for nearly half of the energy used nationwide. So that's a big number, a lot of energy that we're using in buildings. Here in Missoula, we're putting, at Climate Smart, one of the things we're working on is putting final touches on our community's very first greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which will give us concrete data and numbers for where our community is at with energy use. A spoiler, it's not quite out yet, but residential and commercial energy use, as expected, are two of the biggest pieces of our carbon footprint pie right here in Missoula. So we know there is huge potential to address building energy use here. So let's look quickly into some of the benefits, which we've already heard a little bit about. The climate benefits are obvious, and that's what we first think about. A 2016 report found that energy efficiency measures could reduce US energy use by as much as a third. So energy efficiency isn't that exciting, but it actually has huge potential to really, really cut our energy use quickly. And in terms of renewables, they go very well with energy efficiency. As I mentioned at the beginning, if we reduce demand at the same time that we add renewable energy capacity, we just accelerate that transition to clean energy that much more quickly. And actually at the individual level, folks who are considering adding solar panels or distributed renewable energy, by implementing energy efficiency measures first, so sealing leaks or adding insulation, or switching out inefficient appliances, customers can actually save more money than they would just by installing renewable energy alone. So that brings me to the next benefits, which are economic benefits of energy efficiency. Payback often varies depending on what improvements you make, as Mary talked about with PACE, but energy efficiency upgrades generally save customers money on our utility bills, in addition to reducing our carbon footprint. So it's really a win-win. And this benefit is especially valuable for our low-income customers, for whom energy bills are often a disproportionate amount of their monthly budgets. And the next, important things, energy efficiency measures also create jobs for small businesses, and the potential here is also huge. Spending on energy efficiency has a net positive economic impact, and so that's really critical too. And finally, energy efficiency improvements are also valuable on a larger scale. We don't often think this way, but utilities actually call their energy customers, their energy saving measures, demand side management, which is a mouthful. But basically, when demand for energy is reduced, utilities actually avoid expensive infrastructure expansion, which keeps energy costs lower for ratepayers like you and I. And they actually call energy efficiency, for this reason, a resource, which sounds strange. But in our region, the Pacific Northwest, energy efficiency is the second largest electricity resource behind hydro, simply because it's so cost effective and low risk. Here's one example. Compared to developing new energy sources, especially fossil fuel-based ones, energy efficiency is cheap. So cheap that a recent nationwide study found that the cost of implementing energy efficiency measures was 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour, which doesn't make a lot of sense on its own, except that, as you can see in this graph, that's about a half to a third of the cost of developing other new energy resources. So there's really no excuse for utilities not to invest in energy efficiency. Okay, not yet. That's a lot of me talking at you. Let me check in for a second. How many of you own your own home? A lot. Okay. And how many are renters? How many of you renters don't even get your utility bills? A few. Okay. I just always think that's so strange. So another question. So it's winter still, if you didn't notice. Thanks for being here. How many of you have a programmable thermostat that keeps your heat off while you're at home, while you're not at home? I'm sorry. Okay, awesome, good numbers. Okay, so maybe you're thinking, all this energy saving stuff sounds great, but hey, I've been turning off the lights for years. I got rid of my clothes dryer. I sealed all the leaks in my house. I've insulated my attic. What more can I do? Or maybe you're thinking, I'm a renter. My options are pretty limited. So I have one more question for you. How many of you, like me, have felt extra motivated since November 8th to get out in your community and actually do something positive? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. So that's great. We want your help. That's my plea. There's so many good ways to get involved around energy, renewable energy and energy efficiency. And one thing you could consider doing, we would love your help right here in Missoula. Doing our part to implement energy efficiency measures at home and save energy is great. There's lots of tips and tricks for doing those things if you are interested, and they're all on our website, climatesmartmissoula.org, and go ahead and check those out. I won't get into that. But really, we're thinking right now about how we can go big on this, how we can really make a big difference in our community and save energy, save money, and do the right thing all together. So the timing is right, I think, for it. Like I said, we have that inventory. We have actual numbers. We know that residents in Missoula used 262 million kilowatt hours of electricity in 2014. So we've got a number, and we can measure our progress now. And there's energy. There's folks like you all who have time and skills and energy and creativity. And so we have an idea. Our idea is 10% energy savings for our community. Can we save 10% together? And we don't have all the answers to how to get there. So that's where you come in. We need your creativity. We're looking actually for a small group of people, almost like a little focus group, who would like to help us figure out what it would mean for our community to save energy. We have some ideas, but in order to meet that goal, we need your input and your feedback. So do you have creative ideas? about how to encourage your fellow Missoulians to save energy? Do you really like to compete with your neighbors and want to get into it and figure out who can save the most? Can you help us figure out how to take a big leap forward, or at least figure out some better puns to use? We need your help, and we would love to work collaboratively, because that's, I think, when the best change and the most meaningful change happens. So consider this your invitation. We want you on our team. Please find me or Amy, my colleague, afterwards. Sign up outside at Climate Smart's table out there, and stay in the loop and help us move forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Abby. And remember, folks, if you have questions for Abby or some of the other panelists, please write them out on those index cards. And if you need others, Bruce or other 350 members would be glad to hand you some, and pens as well. Our second panelist tonight is Carl Borgest. Carl should get an exemplary award for traveling from Bozeman today to get here tonight. And from what he said, the roads were not terribly good. So we are super glad to see Carl here tonight. Carl's the founder of Absaroka Energy and is responsible for its corporate strategy, management, and operations. Absaroka is focused on supporting the growth of clean, sustainable energy through the development of utility-scale energy storage, transmission, geothermal, wind, and solar projects throughout the Western Interconnect. With long-term experience in law, capital markets, finance, and renewable energy development, Mr. Borgest is sought out after as a presenter and thought leader on infrastructure development, grid innovation, and energy. We're delighted to have him. Please welcome Carl Borgest.
Now you're going to see whether I can run this computer or not, and then I'm not sure what you'll think when I'm done with that. And the microphone. Okay, so Absaroka Energy is in Bozeman, Montana. It's a Montana homegrown renewable utility scale energy company, and I want to talk today in particular about a project that we're working on that I think fits into this discussion that we're having, and I think is a part of what I hope will be the evolution of our grid in sort of the northern plains. This is a mock-up of the facility we intend to build near Martinsdale, Montana. And I'm going to step back here so I can keep my neck sorted out. So right here, you're looking at the power station. At the back of the facility, obviously, this is the lower reservoir, the upper reservoir, and our transmission connection is back here into the coal strip line. Now that's important. This site we selected is important because when we join that very large transmission line back behind the project, we'll actually be in the networks of PacifiCorp, Puget, Portland General, Avista, and Northwestern. And that I want to talk about in a minute when we talk about why we're building this plan and what we're going to do with it. So this is a by the way, this is a closed system. We build it, we fill up the lower reservoir, and then we start moving water back and forth. It's just a gigantic battery. See, I told you. I warned you. John's going to help me. I don't know what I did. Yep, there it is. I need to go up one, I think, though. I think I can do it here, can I? Huh. Do I have to do it on the side there?
Well, I'll do it and just talk.
Okay, all right. Thank you, John.
Is that the right slide then?
Yeah, that's good. All right, so here's what we're building. Again, a closed system, 400 megawatts. Our battery will produce for 8.5 hours. It takes about 10 hours, by the way, to fully charge it. So we're losing, our efficiency is about 85%. We're going to have 3 units. We're connecting into the coal strip line. This is off-stream, brand new facilities. We will be creating an impact in this area where we're building these swimming pools. The penstock, which I'll talk about in a bit, will be buried. So when you drive by this thing when it's done, you really won't see anything. All of it will be in the ground, essentially. Next slide. The coal strip line, folks, is the backbone of the grid in the Northwest. It's hard for me to describe to you just how big that line is and how much it affects everything that's connected to it. One important point, though, it stops at coal strip. It's not connected to anything else. And because of that, there's an incredibly complicated tripping scheme and management scheme that has to be applied to operate that thing. If we were to connect it to another large transmission line, we would increase our capacity, our reliability, and the effectiveness of that line. And that's one of the other projects that Absaroka Energy is working on, which is a transmission connection from Colstrip down into Wyoming, so that we can put more renewables and more energy on that line and take advantage of the infrastructure we've already created. Next slide. So let me just call your attention here. That's a little human being standing there next to the motor generator. This is one of the units. The power station is the size of a football field, and it will be down in the ground 200 feet. So you've got the turbine, the motor generator, the clutch or coupling, and the pump. The equipment that we're going to put into the Gordon Butte facility is in the ground and spinning in Europe, but it's the newer generation of pump storage equipment. Old pump storage equipment had to be stopped, the machine had to be dewatered, and then you would reverse it to change from pumping to generating. This machine spins the same direction all the time. It can actually pump and generate at the same time, though that's not very efficient. And what that does is it allows us to move between pumping and generating very, very quickly. And that's important when we compete with gas. And I want to talk to you about that. Next slide. This is from the COPS facility in Austria that's using this equipment. And what you're looking at here is 24 hours. This line in the middle is essentially the facility at a standstill. And you can see that it can move very, very quickly from pumping to generating. That's really important when you're trying to backstop renewables, particularly wind, right? Next slide. This is 24 hours at the David Gates generating station. Northwestern Energy is using a gas plant to regulate its system. It has to move that plant every 4 seconds, up and down, to accommodate changes in load, changes in generation, the wind kicking on, the wind kicking off. They have to have something that they can move up and down so that the system doesn't crash. They do it with this gas plant, and this is just how this thing moves. You can see at some of these points here, we're moving almost 100 megawatts in a matter of minutes, right? So, John, if you go back, think about this slide. Thus, a plant that can perform like this, right? That's why we're putting it in the ground. The interesting thing, the point I want to make to you, though, is if I were building a gas plant, all I can do is generate. I can't store energy. I can't cover that entire range. I can only put electrons on the grid. I can't take them off the grid. So for Northwestern or the other utilities using gas, what they have to do is they have to take that gas plant up, turn it on, warm it up, start burning gas. They set it at the halfway point, and then they start moving it up and down in order to accommodate what's going on in the system. The pump storage can sit at 0, right? So it can cover that both directions. And what that means is, for the price of putting this in the ground, this is what gas can do. This is what pump storage can do. This facility, we think, will come in at about $2 million a megawatt. The David Gates facility was about $1.7 million. So for a little bit of an upcharge, we end up creating twice the regulation capacity. That's not to mention the fact that with a facility like this, there are so many other things that we can do that are important. Let me give you an example of this. We're all ratepayers for Northwestern. We just bought a whole fleet of hydroelectric dams. Okay? Those hydroelectric dams, 7 of the 9 are strictly run-of-river licenses. So that means water comes in, it's got to flow through the dam and go back out again. At night, that energy has nowhere to go. There's no load to serve. The grid is full of coal and wind with nowhere to go. So Northwestern ends up dropping that energy for basically next to nothing. What we want to use this facility to do is to regulate on the pump side at night. We can still cover all this capacity and peaking issues, right? But we'll basically be pushing water up to the upper reservoir at night and still regulating the system. Every 4 seconds, that thing's going to move up and down, right? And during the day, we take all that energy that we now stored and we regulate on the generation side during the day, except we also get to sell the energy. So we've performed the regulation service. We've made a profit on the energy that was wasted at night and was a nuisance. And we're still covering and keeping the situation reliable. Okay, next slide. One more. Okay, let's talk about the wind. Wind is a great resource. It's clean, it's free. The technology is mature. The problem is that it does move up and down very, very quickly. And in order to keep the system healthy, you have to have something that you can move up and down very, very quickly to backstop it. Thus the gas plant, or thus the behavior of that pump storage in the COPS graph that I showed you. Next slide. The other thing that's happening out in the Western Interconnect, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about why we need storage, not just about storage technologies, but why. This is a representation of the California duck curve. And I don't know, have you all heard about this? Does this, okay. So here's what's happening in California. And by the way, what happens in California ends up affecting our energy markets and affecting us because we're all part of the Western Interconnect. In California and Arizona and Nevada during the day, the solar starts ramping up through the late morning and into the afternoon. Then, about the time that everyone is still at the office and starting to make their way home and turn things on, the solar drops off precipitously. And so the forecast, think about this, 2020, the forecast is in a matter of hours, the utilities in California have to move almost 12,000 megawatts in order to make up for the solar that dropped off. And what are they using to do that? They're using gas. Think about that. Colstrip's 2,500 megawatts, even with units 1 and 2. They've got gas plants all over that are trying to deal with this situation. Storage is the clean solution to burning gas, right? Because you can store energy while the solar is ramping up during the day and then disperse it at the end of the duck curve when people are going home and the solar is dropping off. Next slide. Listen, I'm a pump storage guy. I'm also a battery guy. But pump storage, though very difficult to develop, is the cheapest form of storage. It's the most deployed form of storage out there. It's the storage that we'll need to put in the middle of a big transmission line like Colstrip. We'll use batteries in substations. We'll use them in different places, but there's kind of a role for each of those storage mediums. And I want to encourage all of you to think about it's not a one-size-fit-all. Pump storage doesn't solve everything. Batteries don't solve everything. Next slide. This is just a comparison by cost, but go to the next slide. See, and that's not my fault. I didn't touch that thing. This is one of the biggest batteries, utility scale batteries, lithium-ion batteries in North America. It's 8 megawatts. It has a capacity of 4 hours. To put it apples to apples against pump storage, it's about 13 million a megawatt for 8 hours. We're going to come in somewhere in the 2 million, 2.1 million range, right? Now, the advantage of this is it's easy to site. Pump storage, difficult to develop. But believe me, I just went through getting my FERC license for this project, right? That's not for the faint of heart. So again, it's not that I'm saying pump storage is the only solution. It's just you need to think about what you're going to use in what place for what problem and what that technology is going to be able to do. The price of batteries, lithium ion, will come down. And again, the advantage is it's easy to site. You pour a pad, you stick the battery in and hook it up, right? Next slide. There are a couple other storage. I was asked to talk about different storage out there. Case compressed air is another one of these where you're essentially pumping gas down into a salt dome and then bringing it back out and burning gas. You're essentially burning gas and compressed air. Next slide. This one's interesting. You essentially create a linear line going up a hill and move that weighted rail system up and down. This is a great idea. It hasn't really happened yet. We'll see how it goes. It's a linear facility that sometimes cuts through wildlife areas, so that I think has slowed some of this down. Next slide. And of course, we've got batteries in our electric cars, and we haven't quite figured out how to harness all of that, but that's coming in the next decade, I would say. All right, I'm going to be available for your questions. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl. And remember, folks, if you need question or card questions, raise your hand and Bruce will get you one of those cards to ask your questions. Our final speaker tonight is Ann Hedges. She also gets an award for traveling from Helena to Missoula tonight. Ann, we're so delighted to have you here. Ann has been Deputy Director and Lead Lobbyist for the Montana Environmental Information Center since 1993. Ann works with citizens, administrative agencies, and elected officials on issues such as global warming, energy policy, air pollution, coal mining, state lands management, land use regulation, and general environmental policy. Most recently, Ann has focused on air quality, waste, mining, and water issues surrounding the development of Montana's vast coal resources. Ann is one of our great resources. Please welcome Ann Hedges.
I don't have a PowerPoint. I hope that's not a problem. For those of you who don't know who I am or what my organization is, Montana Environmental Information Center is an organization that was founded in Montana in the early 70s. It was founded to lobby the Montana legislature on environmental issues. There's so many people in Montana who have been involved in our organization since its beginning. And we have grown stronger and stronger as time has gone on. And we right now have found that our most important work has to do with the state level work on climate issues and climate policy. And that the motivation in our state is really wonderful. And we have a great resource of people to help do that, despite our politics. So I just want to say I fundamentally disagree with James Hansen, my hero. I think he's wrong. What I heard tonight, first off, is that James Hansen thinks that we have to solve all of the political problems in our country in order to solve the climate crisis. And I just don't believe that's true. We need to solve all those problems that he mentioned. There's no doubt about that. But we can and are solving a lot of our climate issues because of organizations like we heard from tonight, local organizations, Climate Smart Missoula, MELT. We have innovators throughout this state who are working hard to try and switch our energy system to a clean energy system. Montana Renewable Energy Association, if Andrew was still here, he's in the way back. You know, there are innovators throughout our state who are working on switching our energy system. And to say that we have to solve the political problem that we face today before we can solve the climate crisis, it will be too late. We don't have that much time. And it's already happening. And I'm so heartened by Montanans. So we are a purple state, right? We are this funny mix of red and blue. But what we found in polling, as Jim mentioned earlier, is that in Montana, 95% of the people in our state, so that's got to be Republicans and Democrats, want more more energy efficiency. 92% of the people in the state want more solar energy developed. 87% of the people in this state want more wind energy developed. 67% of the people in the state want more coal. So Montanans want it all, but overwhelmingly, Montanans want clean energy, far more so than more coal. And that gives me hope. And it gives me hope because there's innovators like Carl out there. There are innovators like people that work at MREA and all of the businesses that belong to MREA, that we are going to get there despite what James Hansen thinks. I just disagree with him, despite him being a hero for our movement. Change is happening. And it is, you know, we've been looking at the Obama administration making change in this country on climate-related issues for the last, well, 4 years, really, and being really excited about it. And it's caused a lot of us to become complacent. We've been thinking the federal government is going to save us. It's going to pass this great climate policy. It's going to limit carbon emissions from coal plants all over the country. It's going to do this and it's going to do that. Isn't it wonderful? Obama was going to save the climate crisis. He signed the Paris Accords, and we all went into our own little worlds, and we all did our own little thing, thinking, great, good. He's doing the work that needs to be done. And he was. But that isn't where the real work was being done. And it is not where the real work is being done. And it is not where change is going to occur. And that is because it's happening at the local level and it's happening at the state level. The federal level has always been pie in the sky, in my opinion, other than things like tax incentives, which are really, really helpful to level the playing field with renewables and energy efficiency and fossil fuels, who all of their tax incentives have been baked into the system since the 70s. They have had all these tax breaks for a long time, and they're baked into our tax codes. So when people say, oh, the production tax credit is unfair and it gives wind this unfair advantage, the only reason the U.S. Congress passed a production tax credit is to level the playing field with fossil fuels. So while the federal level, there is a role for them to play when it comes to things like tax incentives to help encourage renewable energy, it is not the place where change is happening. And change is happening, regardless of how disheartened so many of us are at the federal level and what's going on. President Trump, in my mind, is a walking disaster. But that, for us, we can't look to them. We can't look to the feds. We can't look to the EPA to solve this crisis. We can look right here at home. And I think you're hearing that. You heard somebody, Abby, talk tonight about energy efficiency being exciting. She's right. It is the most boring topic, no offense, but it is the most important thing we can do, and it's happening. Northern Plains has taken the lead on the PACE legislation. How they can make something called PACE sound exciting is beyond me, but they've done it, and they are moving forward, and we just might get PACE legislation because of Northern Plains' efforts. And that's the real work that needs to be done. The states have always been where this work has been done, always. Where have renewable energy standards passed? Has it been at the federal level? No. Renewable energy standards passed at the state level. Even Montana has a renewable energy standard, thanks to Senator Tester. You know, and Governor Schweitzer, but Senator Tester was the sponsor of that bill when it passed in 2005. We have net metering in the states. Do we have a net metering law at the federal level? No. We have net metering at the state level. Lots of states have net metering. In fact, Montana passed net metering, which is the system in which you can put solar panels on your roof and you can get credit from your utility for the energy that they produce. We passed that in 1999. Now, we think things are bleak now, but I was lobbying in 1999, and it wasn't pretty. You know, we had Roscoe as our governor, we had Republican-controlled House and Senate, and we passed net metering because it was a good idea. And do you know who helped MEIC pass that legislation when it started to flail? Northwestern Energy, because they didn't think it was a big deal at that time. Now, who is the biggest opponent to net metering? Northwestern Energy. But we're still there, and we are increasing the number of net meter systems in our across the state every year. And now we have a whole industry in Montana, a whole industry that is developing across the state, not just out in Colstrip, not just in eastern Montana, not out in Sydney. It's developing in Missoula and Helena and Bozeman and Billings and little communities across the state. These solar installers are taking over. In fact, new job reports are showing that 1 in 50 new jobs in the United States are in the solar industry. 1 in 50. That's incredible. Let me find some more statistics for you because I love these stats. It just came out in the last couple days. Solar energy now employs slightly more workers than natural gas, over twice as many as coal, over 3 times as many as wind, and almost 5 times as many as nuclear. Solar energy is our future. And with the help of projects like pumped hydro, we actually can make these intermittent resources work for us around the clock. So where is this being done? It's not being done at the federal level. It's being done right here in Montana. So when we look at what are we facing here? What are the things, other than joining local organizations, that really do help at a local level? What are the things that are going on at the state level that are really making a difference when it comes to climate policy? And I'll tell you what it is. It's a room full of men who are making these decisions. These are 60-plus-year-old men who are sitting around the table, and they're making these decisions based on cost. Cost. They're not thinking about climate change. Most of them are climate deniers. They are. They think climate change is a hoax. But that doesn't matter. We need to talk to them in the language they can hear. And the language they hear is jobs and money. So we have a public service commission. And I just want to do a slight shout out to a public service commission that I never thought I'd be doing a shout out to. Right, it's a miracle. The Public Service Commission in Montana is run by 5 Republicans. And, they have made 2 decisions in the last 2 weeks that are phenomenal. And we should be thanking them. Some of these people are serious Tea Party Republicans, but they are paying attention to the cost of electricity for consumers. And what does that mean? That means we are in the catbird seat because the cost for renewable energy is plummeting. It has been plummeting. Solar energy just bypassed wind as a cheaper resource in a lot of places in the world. It's never universal, but you know, that's impressive. And wind is already super cost competitive. Keep in mind, Northwestern Energy, Montana's biggest utility in the state, right? It's our biggest utility. It is the only utility in the state of Montana that has an interest in the Colstrip power plant. It owns 200 megawatts approximately of a 2,200 megawatt facility. And Northwestern's most expensive resource, guess what it is? It's Colstrip. It's not Judith Gap. It's not the Spion Cop Wind Project. It's not energy efficiency. It's Colstrip. And when you also factor in a couple of what they call qualifying facilities that they have to buy the power from, do you know what the other two most expensive resources are? A waste coal plant and a waste petroleum plant that they are required under the federal law to purchase their energy. They're small, fortunately, and those contracts will end in the early 20s, and those plants will be done because they can't compete on the open market today with wind and solar. And so what did our Public Service Commission do recently? Two things. Now, Jim talked about one of them, which was remarkable. So when utilities, this is so dense and it's so boring, but it's so important. When utilities provide us power, they're monopolies, right? So they are regulated by the Public Service Commission or Utility Commission, depends on what state you're in, who make sure that that monopoly is providing that power in a way that benefits consumers, that they're not just going to run away, make money off of all of us, because they could if they weren't regulated. So that utility has to provide a plan, a 20-year plan to the utility saying, this is how we think we're going to operate over the course of the next 20 years. These are the resources we think we're going to need. And here's the data to support that. And these are supposed to be very comprehensive plans, and the Utility Commission is supposed to look at them. And then down the road, as the utility wants to build something new, the commission looks back to the plan and says, how does that fit into your resource plan? Now, this is all dry work, but something really fun happened last summer. So the Utility Commission, in my world is fun, right? Utility Commission took public comments. And I stood up at this hearing and I was giving them my spiel about how I thought Northwestern Energy's resource plan was lousy because, as you heard, it was completely reliant on gas. No new wind, no new solar. The only wind they wanted was the minimum they needed to meet the renewable energy standard, but no renewable energy that it wasn't required already by law to obtain. It just wanted more gas because when it builds new things, it makes more money. So that's what they wanted to do. And one of the commissioners said to me, how do we get people engaged? How do we make people pay attention to what we're doing? This affects their pocketbook. You know, this affects their everyday lives, the decisions we're making right now. And I said, well, you got to make it interesting. And I don't know how you do that. So I thought about it, and I worked with a few people, and we managed to try to make it interesting by having people submit their choices, their energy choices, in a picture to the Utility Commission. And they got more comments than I think they've ever gotten. They got almost 400 comments from people saying, we want more clean energy. And people were specific about what types of clean energy they wanted. And then the commission did a funny thing. It made the right decision. What the commission did 2 weeks ago is it said, Northwestern, you haven't justified all these gas plants. You know, we are not, well, I was there when they decided to write the letter to Northwestern. And they said, we need to get this out immediately because we want this out before Northwestern goes out and asks for proposals from people to build its gas plant. So the commission that was a shot across the bow because utilities like Northwestern are risk averse. They don't want to go build something unless they know that we as consumers are going to pay them for it, and that they're going to make a nice rate of return on top of that amount of money that they spend. And when the commission sent this letter and said, we think your planning is severely flawed, you didn't look at, you only looked at gas, you didn't even justify that, and you didn't look at, and then it listed the resources it thought that they completely gave short shrift to. The first one, pumped hydro. Hey, yeah, yay. The second, carbon capture and sequestration. I consider that a throwaway because nobody in their right mind would do that. And then they talked about large-scale wind and solar. And then they talked about demand-side response. So as Abby was talking about, energy efficiency. How can Northwestern acquire more efficiency and save consumers money? So what they said in Northwestern is, don't go building a gas plant and expect consumers to pay for it until you have done the math and shown us and shown the public what that math looks like. Because if you build that gas plant, you might not get reimbursed. So number one thing our commission just did, and that's phenomenal. And I can tell you, I've talked to so many people out of state who work in utility commissions, and they think what our commission just did was remarkable. So this is a big deal in the energy world. The other thing they did is, Carl was talking about the coal strip line, right? I don't know, I could talk all night, so I want somebody to keep track of my time and tell me when I'm done. The coal strip line is a giant transmission line that moves power from the coal strip plant to West Coast utilities. As I said, only one Montana utility is invested in coal strip. There's one owner, Talon Energy, used to be PPL, used to be Montana Power, that owns some of it, but they want out. They're losing money left and right because they're not regulated. They don't have a customer base to guarantee a profit on the power from that plant. So Talon is a throwaway. Northwestern is the only utility in Montana that owns a share of Colstrip and has to and passes it on to us and makes a profit off it. Everybody else is on the West Coast. And what do Oregon and Washington want? They don't want coal. They want energy. They don't want coal power. They are looking at their economics. They're looking at the wildfire seasons that have been tremendously expensive for them. They're looking at their shellfish industry that is being harmed by ocean acidification. They are looking at the economic impacts of climate change. They are real. They are experiencing them now, and they don't want any more coal power, and they want to do the responsible thing and wean themselves off coal. So these utilities are sitting there going, okay, we don't want any more power from Colstrip. Well, they didn't exactly say that. We forced them to say that in a lawsuit, but yay! But they are saying that. Their consumers are saying no more. There's a little revolution going on out there. And those utilities are looking right now to replace that energy. So we have a firm date on when Colstrip 1 and 2, the 2 of the 4 units are going to close. And, 2022, maybe. I think it'll close sooner. But regardless, they will not be operating those 2 units past 2022. And that is 700 megawatts of power. So those utilities that own Colstrip Unit 1 and 2, one of them is Puget Sound Energy, they have to replace that power. Where are they going to get it? Well, I know Carl's done a lot of studies. We had a study done by an independent consultant. The best place for those utilities to buy their power, if they want clean energy, is right here in Montana. Our wind blows when their demand is highest. So when everybody's turning on the lights in the middle of winter and turning on their heat, that's when they need the most power. That's when our wind blows. Their wind blows in the summertime. So they should be looking to Montana, and they can couple our wind with Carl's project, and they have a year-round 24/7 resource. And it's cheap. It's really cost competitive, except for one little thing. There's a transmission system that's run by something called the Bonneville Power Association. And BPA has 15,000 miles worth of transmission line, 15,000 miles in the Pacific Northwest. So Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. There's a 90-mile stretch of that 15,000 miles that they charge an extra rate on to move power on that 90-mile stretch, that little tiny 90-mile stretch in Montana that makes our wind energy less competitive with resources in Washington and Oregon. Guess who doesn't want to get rid of that rate, that extra charge? The West Coast utilities, because they want to build gas instead. They think that if they can keep that rate high, the rate for Montana wind coming into their state high, then they will build gas plants in their own state. So there's a concerted effort right now to try to get rid of that, what people call a pancake rate, because it's stacked on top of another rate, the regular rate that the 15,000 miles has. This extra 90-mile charge, we want to get rid of it. We are working as hard as we can to do that. We're involved in the BPA rate case. And you know what our Public Service Commission did last week? They sent a letter to BPA saying, get rid of the pancake rate. You know, really? It was shocking. Yay! These are the little decisions that are happening at the state level, they're happening at the local level, that make a difference on whether we're going to be able to solve the climate crisis. They're esoteric, they might be boring, but I can tell you, last week, 2 weeks ago now, when a bunch of members from 350 Missoula, Montana now, showed up in Helena at a Public Service Commission meeting in a room full of men in blue suits, and they were average citizens, the Public Service Commission took note. They got to say something. They were well-spoken. They were factual. The people who showed up, who came over from Missoula, did a great job. And that is exactly what the Public Service Commission asked of us, is to bring people into the process. And they are the ones who are making decisions on whether Northwestern is going to move forward with building 7 new gas plants, 13 units, 7 new plants, or do something else. And unless people show up at those types of decisions, the wrong decision will be made, because Northwestern has an awful lot of resources and has a lot of incentive, a profit incentive, to try to convince the commission that more gas is the right path forward. But when real humans from outside of Helena show up, they take note, and we really need to increase that. That's what we need to do. We need people to show up in Helena. So Northern Plains has a rally day at the legislature. Other conservation groups have another rally day the week after. And that's a rally day on February 23rd for clean energy. And that's MEIC and Montana Conservation Voters and Montana Audubon and Renewable Energy Association. There will be a rally that day for clean energy in the Capitol. And that afternoon, Dick Barrett, you all know and love, I'm sure. Thank you very much for sending him to Helena. He and Mike Phillips are supporting a bill, and there's going to be a hearing on that day to try to make Montana develop a plan in which we analyze our carbon emissions, and then we figure out how to reduce them. You know, it's going to be the big climate bill of the session. Show up in Helena, testify. Do something more than you did last year. That's the most we can ask of everybody. And there's so many people who did so much last year. But if we all do a little bit more and we keep working at the state and the local level, we can solve this problem. We're going to have to wait 4 years to solve it at the national level. Maybe 2, maybe 1. Hard to say. Maybe we'll get lucky. But it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take a concerted effort. But I disagree with James Hansen. I think we can get there, and I think we can do it with people power. I think that's enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Ann, and we are so glad you are watching out for all of us for all these years. We love it. Okay, panelists, come on back up. We'll try to get through as many of these as we can, and I apologize in advance if I don't read everything correctly, but I'll do my best. Question for Abby with Climate Smart. How do we prevent conservation and efficiency gains from being shifted and wasted elsewhere? Jerome's paradox illuminates that creating efficiencies will actually result in expanded resource use. If we continue relying on market mechanisms, would demand reduction cause lower energy pricing, which in turn is an incentive for consumers to use and waste more? Good luck.
Yeah. Is this on? Okay. I really don't think I can answer that question. But there is a documented effect when it comes to increasing efficiency. There is the rebound effect that's real and is a challenge for sure. And I don't have any great insights into how to prevent that from happening. I think the best, that we can do, and certainly something we try to do at Climate Smart, is incorporate education along with everything that we do. And when people know what their energy mix is, where their energy comes from, what the real impact of using less of it is, I think that can be a very powerful thing. I think that sometimes there are tools that can be useful for folks. Some utilities have really great software options or online platforms that make it easy for customers to see how much energy they've used, 1 month compared to the same month the previous year. And that information is technically available to us through Northwestern, for those of us who are Northwestern customers, but it's not the most user-friendly. So there are ways for that data to be better tracked, for people to be able to see whether that rebound effect is actually happening. So I think those are some important options. But yeah, that's a real challenge.
Thank you. Carl, a couple quickies for you. Tesla Powerwalls, what are they? Batteries, okay. How many other pump storage projects are in the works in the Northwest, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, California?
Well, there are 40 pump storage facilities in the United States right now. Most of them have that old equipment that I talked about, and they were put in the ground 35, 40 years ago and paired often with nuclear and big coal, right? If you're going to spend the money for a nuclear plant, you didn't want the energy to be wasted at night. You wanted to do something with them. The utilities that have those pump storage facilities, even though the equipment's crude, love them because they can move power back and forth and time shift energy and, do all the things that we're talking about here. This equipment we're putting in Gordon Butte's kind of a Ferrari in comparison, but we wanted to put that very fast-acting stuff in the ground. In the Northwest, to get to the question, there are about 5 new pump storage facilities being proposed. That's California, Oregon, Washington, and Montana. The industry thinks that Gordon Butte's going to be the first one that goes in the ground, so we're going to lead, and I really, really want to lead.
Thank you. Whoever wants this one. It doesn't seem like our politicians are proactive in the use of renewable energy. Are they sponsored by the fossil fuel industry? Is this why? Anybody?
No, it's not why. I mean, I don't think that's true. I think that they're ideologues, and they're looking out at money, and they're saying, how do we, all of this stuff is just expensive. They're using old data. They've been hearing this forever, and they don't want to pay for things. But when it comes to solar and net metering, now maybe not all of our legislators are so good, but I'll tell you, conservatives like solar because it's energy independence, it's freedom from the grid, it's all those things that they advocate, and now it's cost effective. So we just need to talk to them, I'm convinced, in terms that they can relate to and not in terms that are motivating us.
Thank you. Abby, I've often wondered how one decides when to get a new energy efficient appliance and when it is better to use the old one until it falls apart, as it does use energy to make new appliances.
That's a great question. And the general rule is that use that appliance until it falls apart. That's the best way of efficiently using the embodied energy in that appliance. There are exceptions to that rule, and it just kind of depends on how those things pencil out. An example might be a hybrid heat pump water heater that is less than, or like, sorry, more than 200%, like double the efficiency of an existing water heater. That's just kind of pulled out of the thin air, but it does depend on your payback and the system and how much that appliance gets used, but the general rule is use it till it's dead and then get a really good one, Energy Saver.
Thank
Energy
you.
Star.
Carl, Japan and Germany have grid-scale ultracapacitors with barium titanate. What can you tell us about progress and costs? Please talk about load-shedding devices.
I don't know anything about barium shedding capacitors. I wish I could help. Sorry.
Okay.
I got nothing.
All right. Well, we've got more for you later. Don't worry. And not to anyone in particular, but let's see if anybody has a response. It feels like pursuing renewable technologies is a strategy akin to a dog chasing its own tail. Considering capitalism's uncanny ability to crank out new electricity-dependent goods and services, which are easily capable of outstripping the buildup of renewable energy capacity, what critique is valid which does not include a plan to end our dependence on market logic and a radical global contraction? A contraction. Good audience here.
So I hope I'm answering this question, but I want to say this about what I'm doing specifically to try to cross the bridge with Northwestern, right? I'm talking about cost. Because she's right, that is the thing that's going to move the needle. So I'm focusing on cost. I'm focusing on competing on cost. I don't want to build a gas plant. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm proud of what I'm trying to do. But in order to win, I have to compete against gas, and damn it, I'm going to compete and I'm going to win on price. And then the rest of it, right? It's just a capitalistic, I want to build a big project, and I want to do that instead of letting them build gas. But I'm working, if you read our comments, Absaroka's comments to the resource plan, talking about the difference between the capacity they want to build with gas and the pump storage, it doesn't talk about climate change or carbon risk. It's all about my tool's better and my tool is cheaper.
Before you give that up, Carl, what's the environmental impact of building this battery or your tool? Environmental costs of materials?
Well, we're taking that, that grassland and putting a swimming pool in it. That's an impact. We have to pull 4,000 acre feet of water for the initial fill and 500 acre feet each year to deal with the evaporative losses. We agreed to do that during the spring runoff, so we're not competing with irrigators, and that kept everybody downstream of us calm and happy. But that's an impact. We're pulling water out of that stream. But that's really it. And if you go look at our 4,000-page license application, about 2,000 of that is a wealth of environmental studies and analyses on this facility and what it's going to do and what its impact will be. But basically, it's pretty low for the 1,000-pound gorilla that we're building to put into the grid.
Thanks. For Ann, does talking in the language of the market, asking for market-friendly changes, only serve to further embed capitalist logic and ensure that fights for just and equitable resource extraction and distribution will carry into the future for our grandchildren?
I want to win. And the way you win right now, talking to the people who are making the decisions, is you talk in their language. We know why we're doing this. We can talk to our fellow people, our allies, our compatriots, and we work with an awful lot of people. We can talk in our language. But if I go up to the legislature, or if I how about this one? Here's an example. We argued last year that Northwestern Energy should not get reimbursed for the outage at Colstrip. So Colstrip broke down, it was broken for 6 months, and Northwestern Energy not only wanted to charge consumers as if the plant were operating, it also wanted to charge us for the replacement power that it had to buy. It wanted to double charge consumers. Now, I don't like Colstrip. I think Colstrip is a bad actor. I think it's the third highest carbon polluter in the nation. And so, you know, what did I want? I wanted our commission to make sure that Northwestern felt some pain for having a plant that broke, that it's a polluting plant, it's a dirty plant, it's an old plant, and we shouldn't have to pay when that plant breaks down. They should have to bear some of that risk. If I had gone to the Public Service Commission and told them why I don't like the Colstrip plant, it wouldn't have worked. But instead, the commission sided with us, and they told Northwestern that they didn't get to recover all of their costs for Colstrip. And you know what that does to a utility when they start having a resource that's breaking down and they're not going to get money out of? Guess what? It starts shifting their thinking. So when I go out and I talk to, you know, people that I know are in the same vein, I'll talk about climate change. But if I want to talk to people who have a decision facing them today, and that decision is going to affect climate change, but I can win without talking about it, and I will lose if I do talk about it, you know what I'm going to do?
I bet this might be for Abby. Why do we want cheap energy? Won't we use more externalities? How do you incentivize energy retrofits on existing houses? Implement energy budgets for new buildings?
Well, there's a lot there.
These are very full questions, folks.
Well, I think there are a lot of incentives for energy efficiency. Unfortunately, we have fewer of them with Northwestern than some utilities offer. But there are still rebates. There are, you can get a free energy audit if you've never had one on your home. And they will come in and offer upgrades for free and help you prioritize what efficiency upgrades to make. So there are those resources available. There should arguably be a much larger investment in those efficiency measures, especially for low-income folks. Like as I mentioned, that's such a huge chunk of the energy budget. So there are great groups out there. The Human Resource Council here in Missoula, we just had a meeting with them today. They weatherized 215 low-income homes last year, and really are trying to make a difference for folks. So there are great programs and resources available. We need to keep using them so that we can prove that there is not enough and we need more. But they're out there, yeah.
Thanks. A couple for Carl. It seems like this audience is intrigued with some of this new technology that we're experiencing. Has Northwest Energy agreed to purchase energy powered by Upsaroka Energy? If so, how will purchase price be determined?
No.
Well, moving right along.
But
How long will it take to get pump storage at Gordon Butte? How will it be financed?
well, it'll be financed when Northwestern, Puget, Portland General comes in and either buys the project or buys the capacity so we can put the financing in place. Listen, I want to sort of riff off of something that Ann said. We've got a monopoly, all right? The monopoly does some good things for us, but it also has some baggage, right? In a monopoly and a group that's got a monopoly, they're going to take the easiest path of least resistance that they can find. That's not Gordon Butte. That's pouring a concrete pad and bolting a jet engine down and burning gas. And I don't think we should expect them to do anything else. It's in their best interest not to take any risks, not to do interesting things, right? Just to do the easy thing. I don't feel mad about that. I just acknowledge that that's what they're doing. But something that Ann said really rang true with me as I look out at all of you. The Public Service Commission is a group of politicians. And they're a group of politicians, I think I can say, that within a range are trying to make objectively good decisions about what to do. They're kind of agnostic about the things that we're interested in, maybe, but they're also movable, as we've seen that, right? They're movable by dollars and cents and sort of the cost benefit of things. So I say, when I file comments at the Public Service Commission, which I know Northwestern will read, that building a pump storage plant's more complicated. Certainly getting it developed is almost impossible, I can tell you that. But I did it, right? We did it. And there it is. And I expect before the day is done, back on that analysis, because we just create more capacity for a cheaper price, that we'll carry the day. And I'm going to stay at it until we do. And I would say that politely to anybody at Northwestern, that you got to take a look at us because we're just a better benefit for ratepayers.
Thanks. We got a few more folks, and then we may be done for tonight. And this may be for Ann or Abby. Northwestern Energy has summer peaking electric loads because of hotter summers and more air conditioners and irrigation pumps. Can high-flow, low-head hydro work in irrigation canals? This would reduce peak loads. Or maybe Carl.
Yeah, it can, and actually FERC is trying to expedite the licensing of that kind of hydro because there's a lot of slack or unused opportunity in the system that people are starting to look at, which is great. Non-powered dams, irrigation systems, all can. They're already doing the work. We just need to put the machinery in to capture the effect that's already there. So, yes.
And for whoever would like this one, it was suggested that a switch to efficient energy won't be enough at this point in time. What other precautions are you anticipating will be necessary to take perhaps a larger change?
There is no silver bullet. There's no one single thing that's going to solve the crisis that we face. It is going to be efficiency. It is going to be solar. It is going to be wind. It is going to be battery technology, whether that's pumped hydro or something else. It is going to be a panoply of ideas. It is not going to be any single thing that's going to solve the problem that we have today.
Thanks. And Carl, how much current solar, wind, and hydro excess power can your pump storage handle? How many pump storage facilities do we need to handle all our solar, wind, hydro excess energy? Do we have other good sites for pump storage?
Yes, we do. So a couple of things. One, let me take you back to the spinning mass issue, if I didn't mention that before. As those coal plants come down, and they will over time go away, we have to replace, wind and solar can't create the flywheel effect that's necessary and comes out of that spinning iron in the ground that keeps that big, massive line supported from a voltage and frequency perspective. So we're going to have some pump storage on that line as we take coal off in order to keep the voltage supported. So that's just going to happen. And we have another site that we've permitted, and as soon as we finish Gordon Butte, we're going to start working on that one. And I think that will be part of what happens when Colstrip 3 and 4 start to transition out of the grid, and we'll try to interconnect that one. We've done studies where we've backstopped several thousand megawatts of wind with the Gordon Butte facility. And I'll just give you a little example of this. We've done some internal modeling with Gordon Butte where we took the facility and biased it at night off peak to be pumping and storing energy, and then paired with 1,500 megawatts of wind to produce on peak from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And we modeled that, selling that energy at $60 with no rec credits, no PTC, no other tax credits or any tax planning at all, just $60 all in. And we were able to pay for the wind facilities and the pump storage. Our capacity factor on peak in that scenario was 74%, which is almost getting up into coal and certainly better than gas.
It's better than Colstrip 1 and 2 right now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. And we did that because we wanted to show that we could produce something. Again, this is back to this dollars and cents. How does my tool work? I want to take away the issue that we can't produce a smooth, reliable, renewable product with these two paired together.